They laughed at the quiet woman in the worn beige coat before they realized the entire building answered to her. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Aurelius Hotel cast golden reflections across the marble floors as Manhattan's wealthiest guests drifted through the ballroom entrance, carrying champagne flutes worth more than most people's weekly grocery bills. Women in diamond necklaces stepped carefully in designer heels, while men in tailored tuxedos discussed investment mergers and luxury developments in low, confident voices. A string quartet played softly near the floating staircase leading to the private VIP floor above, a level so exclusive most guests would never even see it open. And standing quietly near the entrance beneath all that gold light was Evelyn Carter. She looked completely out of place. Her beige wool coat looked several winters old. Her dark brown hair was tied back in a simple low ponytail. No diamonds. No designer handbag. No visible makeup beyond what looked practical and minimal. In one hand, she carried a thin black document folder pressed gently against her chest. Around her wrist rested an old silver bracelet with a tiny engraved emblem almost hidden beneath her sleeve. A passing couple glanced at her and exchanged amused smiles. "Did housekeeping get lost?" the woman whispered under her breath before sipping champagne. Her husband chuckled quietly. Nearby, another guest looked Evelyn up and down with open disbelief. "No way she belongs here," he muttered. Evelyn heard every word, but her expression never changed. Her blue eyes remained calm as she stepped toward the reception desk beneath the towering glass sculpture in the center lobby. Behind the desk stood Vanessa Whitmore, chairwoman of the gala committee and unofficial queen of Manhattan social circles. Vanessa looked exactly like the kind of woman magazines love to photograph. Platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, white satin gown worth several $1,000s. Diamond earrings catching every flicker of chandelier light. At 46, Vanessa carried herself with the polished confidence of someone who believed luxury itself had chosen her personally. She noticed Evelyn. Immediately. More importantly, she noticed the coat, then the shoes, then the old bracelet. Vanessa's smile tightened almost invisibly. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested the opposite. Evelyn offered a small polite nod. "I'm here for the Harrington Foundation Gala." Vanessa blinked once before glancing discreetly toward another woman beside her. The two exchanged the kind of silent look wealthy people perfected over decades. Judgment without words. "Of course you are," Vanessa replied smoothly. "And your invitation?" Evelyn carefully opened the black folder in her hands. Inside sat a single black envelope embossed with silver lettering. Even before Vanessa touched it, she recognized the envelope's stock immediately. It wasn't standard. It belonged to the highest invitation tier in the entire event. For a brief second, confusion flickered across Vanessa's face. Then she noticed the edges of the envelope looked slightly worn, as though it had been carried in an ordinary purse instead of a designer clutch. Her confidence returned instantly. "Interesting," Vanessa murmured. She opened the envelope slowly while several nearby guests subtly leaned closer pretending not to watch. Vanessa pulled out the invitation card and scanned it. Her expression sharpened slightly. No printed guest name. Only a small silver crest stamped into the corner. Evelyn stood patiently while whispers slowly spread through the marble lobby like smoke. Probably borrowed someone's invitation. Maybe she found it. "This is embarrassing." One younger employee near the check-in table looked uncertain. "Ms. Whitmore," he said quietly, "that crest means—" Vanessa silenced him with a single glance. Then she looked back at Evelyn and smiled the way wealthy people smiled when preparing to humiliate someone politely. "This level of invitation is reserved for private investors and executive members," Vanessa said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Are you certain you're attending the correct event?" A few people nearby laughed softly. Evelyn remained calm. "Yes," she answered quietly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Vanessa's smile faded by half an inch. That answer irritated her more than anger would have. Across the lobby, a group of socialites openly stared now, their attention fully captured. One woman leaned toward her friend and whispered loudly enough to carry. "She looks broke." The others smirked into their glasses. The room felt warmer suddenly. Heavier. But Evelyn simply adjusted her grip on the black folder. And for the briefest moment, the sleeve of her coat shifted enough for the silver bracelet on her wrist to catch the chandelier light. One older hotel employee walking past froze mid-step, when he noticed the engraved emblem on it. His eyes widened instantly. But before he could speak, Vanessa placed the invitation card back into the envelope and slid it across the desk with 2 fingers. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake," she said coolly. "This gala maintains very specific standards." The words hung in the air like perfume and poison. Several guests nodded approvingly. Others pretended not to stare while clearly enjoying every second of the humiliation unfolding in front of them. Evelyn looked around slowly at the crystal lights, the marble floors, the expensive dresses, the amused expressions. Then she looked back at Vanessa. Her voice stayed soft. "Steady. Standards reveal more about the people enforcing them than the people being judged." For the first time all evening, the smile disappeared completely from Vanessa Whitmore's face. And somewhere high above them, beyond the glowing glass elevators leading to the private VIP floor, a quiet electronic tone suddenly echoed through the hotel ceiling. The soft electronic tone faded almost as quickly as it had appeared, but several guests near the glass elevators glanced upward in confusion before returning their attention to the scene unfolding at the reception desk. Vanessa Whitmore folded her arms slowly, her diamond bracelet shimmering beneath the chandelier light as she studied Evelyn Carter with renewed suspicion. The younger employee beside her shifted uneasily, still staring at the silver emblem bracelet on Evelyn's wrist, but he said nothing. He knew better than to interrupt Vanessa publicly. The Grand Aurelius Hotel was built on appearances, and Vanessa ruled appearances like a queen protecting her throne. "I think it would be best if we resolved this quietly," Vanessa said with controlled politeness that somehow sounded colder than open hostility. "The gala begins in less than 20 minutes, and our guests expect a certain atmosphere." Evelyn remained still beside the marble counter, her beige coat contrasting sharply against the polished gold and black decor surrounding her. Every person in the lobby seemed sculpted for luxury magazines. Tailored tuxedos, silk gowns, watches worth more than luxury sedans. And standing among them was a quiet woman whose coat sleeves looked slightly worn at the cuffs. The contrast alone had already made her guilty in their eyes. Vanessa noticed the silence spreading across the room and subtly straightened her posture. She was enjoying this now. "You understand, of course," she continued smoothly, "that these events involve executives, investors, public figures. Security protocols are extremely strict." Evelyn nodded once. "I understand." "Good," Vanessa replied. "Then you understand why your appearance has created confusion." The words landed softly, but the meaning underneath them was sharp enough to make several nearby guests smirk into their champagne glasses. One older man whispered to his wife, "That coat probably costs less than valet parking tonight." His wife laughed quietly behind her hand. Evelyn heard that too. Still, her face remained calm. That composure unsettled Vanessa more than outrage would have. Most people in Evelyn's position would have grown embarrassed by now. Defensive. Emotional. But Evelyn simply observed the room with steady blue eyes, almost as though she were studying everyone individually. The silence around her carried an unusual weight. Vanessa leaned slightly closer across the reception desk. "May I ask what exactly your connection is to the Harrington Foundation?" she asked. "Investor?" "Something like that," Evelyn answered quietly. Vanessa gave a small, amused laugh. "That is a very vague answer." "Not everything important needs to be announced loudly," Evelyn replied. The room went subtly quieter. Vanessa's smile tightened again. Nearby, 2 women in shimmering silver gowns openly looked Evelyn over from head to toe. One of them tilted her head toward the old silver bracelet. "Can you believe she wore that here?" she whispered. "It looks antique store vintage." "Or fake vintage pretending to be expensive," the other replied. The younger hotel employee standing near the desk swallowed nervously. He kept glancing at the bracelet, at the tiny engraved crest hidden in the silver. He had seen that symbol before during executive security training months ago. But before he could process the thought fully, Vanessa spoke again. "This gala supports elite development initiatives across New York," she explained loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Many attendees tonight represent generational wealth and major corporate leadership." Her eyes moved deliberately over Evelyn's coat. "Naturally, we try to maintain a polished environment consistent with those standards." Several people nodded approvingly at that. One man even murmured, "Exactly right." Evelyn looked toward the enormous ballroom doors where hotel staff carefully arranged crystal trays beneath soft golden lighting. Beyond them, live musicians tuned violins while servers in white gloves prepared imported champagne. Everything inside the Grand Aurelius Hotel had been designed to project perfection, wealth, exclusivity, and yet none of it seemed to impress her. That was what made Vanessa increasingly uncomfortable. "You seem very calm for someone being denied entry," Vanessa observed carefully. Evelyn finally looked directly at her. People reveal themselves most clearly when they think someone beneath them cannot affect their future. The sentence landed strangely across the marble lobby. A few guests exchanged uncertain glances. Vanessa forced a soft laugh. "That sounds philosophical." "Experience usually is," Evelyn replied. Across the room, the giant glass elevators leading toward the private VIP floor remained dark and inactive. Most guests never even noticed them anymore. They were simply part of the luxury atmosphere, another symbol of status beyond ordinary reach. But Evelyn's eyes drifted toward them briefly before returning to Vanessa. That small glance did not go unnoticed by the nervous young employee at the desk. His confusion deepened. Vanessa reached for the black invitation envelope once more and examined the silver crest stamped into the corner. No printed guest name. No sponsor branding. Just the symbol. Simple. Quiet. Powerful. She suddenly disliked the envelope almost as much as she disliked Evelyn's composure. "Where exactly did you receive this invitation?" Vanessa asked. "Directly," Evelyn answered. "From whom?" "Someone who built this place." Vanessa almost rolled her eyes at that. "The Grand Aurelius was developed by the Beaumont Hospitality Group," she replied confidently. "I know the ownership structure very well." Evelyn gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "Do you?" For the first time all evening, Vanessa hesitated. Only for a second, but it was enough for the younger employee to notice. Around them, whispers continued drifting through the chandelier-lit lobby like smoke through glass. "She is definitely lying. Probably trying to sneak upstairs. Security should remove her already. Look at her shoes." Yet through all of it, Evelyn Carter stood with quiet patience, her fingers resting lightly against the black folder while the silver bracelet caught another brief reflection of gold light. And somewhere above the ballroom ceiling, hidden behind the sealed private level of the Grand Aurelius Hotel, another faint electronic tone echoed through the building. The second electronic tone faded into silence above the ballroom, but this time more people noticed it. Several guests near the floating staircase turned their heads toward the darkened glass elevators leading to the private VIP level. The elevators remained sealed, their glossy black doors reflecting chandelier light like mirrors. Then the music from the string quartet resumed, and the crowd slowly relaxed again. Vanessa Whitmore did not relax. Something about Evelyn Carter's calmness was beginning to disturb her carefully controlled evening. Most people folded under social pressure, especially in rooms like this. Wealthy crowds had a way of making outsiders feel small without ever raising their voices. Yet, Evelyn stood in the center of that pressure without shrinking at all. Vanessa decided it was time to end the situation publicly before curiosity spread any further. She turned slightly toward one of the security supervisors stationed near the ballroom entrance. "Mr. Delaney," she called smoothly. A tall man in a dark tailored security suit approached immediately. His polished earpiece and straight posture matched the luxury image of the Grand Aurelius perfectly. "Is there a problem, Ms. Whitmore?" he asked professionally. Vanessa gestured subtly toward Evelyn. "There appears to be confusion regarding event access." Mr. Delaney looked at Evelyn politely but cautiously. His eyes moved first to the worn beige coat, then the simple shoes, then finally the black invitation envelope still resting on the marble counter. "May I see your credentials, ma'am?" he asked. Evelyn handed him the envelope without hesitation. Around them, more guests had begun gathering near the reception area under the excuse of collecting champagne or checking auction schedules. In reality, they wanted entertainment. Public humiliation inside luxury settings always attracted attention. A man in a navy tuxedo whispered to his companion, "This is exactly why private events need stricter screening." Nearby, a woman with emerald earrings tilted her head toward Evelyn and quietly said, "She looks like she walked in from the subway." Soft laughter followed. The younger employee behind the desk lowered his eyes uncomfortably. He hated this kind of scene, but no one challenged Vanessa Whitmore publicly. Not if they valued their careers. Mr. Delaney opened the black envelope carefully and studied the silver crest. His professional expression flickered for the briefest moment. Vanessa noticed immediately. "Is there an issue?" she asked. "No, Ms. Whitmore," he answered quickly. Too quickly. He returned the envelope to Evelyn with measured politeness. "This invitation is highly unusual." Vanessa folded her arms. Unusual does not mean valid. Several nearby guests nodded approvingly. Evelyn accepted the envelope calmly and slid it back into the black folder against her chest. Then, without any sign of frustration, she lightly touched the old silver bracelet resting against her wrist. Her fingers paused there for a moment, almost thoughtfully. Mr. Delaney noticed the movement. So did the younger employee. Both men exchanged a quick glance neither fully understood. Vanessa caught the look and grew more irritated. "This gala is not open to the public," she said firmly. "The people upstairs tonight are discussing 8- and 9-figure partnerships. This is not some sightseeing attraction." Evelyn's eyes lifted briefly toward the private glass elevators again. "I know exactly what is being discussed upstairs," she answered softly. Vanessa let out a quiet laugh that carried through the marble lobby. "That confidence is remarkable." "Confidence usually comes from experience," Evelyn replied. One of Vanessa's closest friends stepped forward then. Cynthia Holloway. Old money. Perfect blonde curls. Diamond necklace worth nearly $500,000. She glanced openly at Evelyn's coat before speaking to Vanessa in a voice intentionally loud enough for others to hear. "Vanessa, darling, the photographers are arriving. We cannot have awkward scenes in the lobby." "I am aware," Vanessa answered coolly. Cynthia looked Evelyn over once more. "Honestly, this is becoming uncomfortable for everyone." Evelyn met her gaze politely. Discomfort often reveals character too. Cynthia blinked at that, caught off guard by the quiet sharpness beneath the words. A few guests shifted uneasily. Others smirked harder. Vanessa decided to regain control completely. "Mr. Delaney," she said, "please escort Ms. Carter to the front entrance while we verify whether this invitation was issued in error." The room grew quieter immediately. Even the string quartet seemed distant now. Evelyn looked at the security supervisor, then calmly placed the black folder down on the marble reception desk. For the first time, the edge of a document inside became visible beneath the folder flap. Thick cream-colored paper with embossed silver lettering. Legal formatting. Official seals. Mr. Delaney's eyes narrowed slightly before he looked away. Evelyn noticed. Vanessa did not. "There is no need for this to become dramatic," Vanessa continued smoothly. "The Grand Aurelius simply maintains standards appropriate for its clientele." Evelyn rested one hand lightly on the folder. "Standards are important," she said quietly, "especially for leadership." Vanessa smiled thinly. "Exactly." Evelyn's fingers brushed the old bracelet again. Then she asked one simple question in the calmest voice anyone had heard all evening. "Has anyone informed the executive floor that I have arrived?" The question landed strangely across the lobby. Cynthia frowned slightly. Mr. Delaney's posture stiffened almost invisibly. Even the younger employee behind the desk looked suddenly nervous. Vanessa, however, only smiled wider, mistaking the moment for desperation. "The executive floor does not know you exist," she replied coldly. And almost immediately after the words left her mouth, the dark glass elevators behind them illuminated in soft gold light. The gold light surrounding the glass elevators glowed for only 3 seconds before fading again, but the effect on the lobby was immediate. Conversation slowed. Several guests exchanged uncertain looks while the musicians near the ballroom entrance missed 2 notes almost simultaneously. Mr. Delaney stared toward the elevators with visible confusion before quickly regaining his professional posture. Vanessa Whitmore, however, refused to let the moment shift control away from her. "Probably another executive arrival upstairs," she said dismissively, though her voice carried less confidence than before. Cynthia Holloway nodded too quickly. "Exactly. This place runs on automation. Everything lights up." But neither woman sounded fully convinced. Evelyn Carter remained still beside the marble reception desk, one hand resting lightly on the black folder while the soft gold reflections from the chandeliers shimmered against her old silver bracelet. The younger employee behind the desk swallowed nervously again. He could not stop looking at the emblem engraved into the bracelet. He knew he had seen it before. Somewhere important. Somewhere restricted. Vanessa noticed his distraction and immediately snapped her attention toward him. "Ethan," she said. Sharply, "focus on the guest list." The young employee straightened instantly. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore." Vanessa turned back toward Evelyn with renewed coldness. "I think this situation has continued long enough." Around them, more wealthy guests had gathered subtly near the reception area, pretending to check auction catalogs or sip champagne. In reality, everyone wanted to witness the outcome. Luxury crowds loved quiet humiliation because it allowed them to feel superior while remaining polite enough to deny cruelty later. One older woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. "If she cannot afford proper attire, why come to a billionaire gala?" Her husband shrugged. "Some people want to feel important for one night." Soft laughter followed. Evelyn heard every word. Her expression never changed. That calmness was becoming unbearable for Vanessa. "Ms. Carter," Vanessa continued, "this event is invitation only, and your credentials cannot currently be verified through our executive registry." Evelyn glanced briefly toward the black envelope resting partly inside her folder. "That registry was updated 6 months ago," she said quietly. Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me." "Nothing," Evelyn answered calmly. Mr. Delaney looked toward Evelyn again. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke. Not defensive, not nervous. Certain, like someone observing a mistake already made. Vanessa stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice enough to sound controlled, but still loud enough for nearby guests to hear every word. "The Grand Aurelius maintains a reputation built over decades. Our guests expect privacy, exclusivity, and professionalism. You may not realize this, but appearances matter in environments like these." Her eyes moved deliberately over Evelyn's beige coat once more. "People upstairs tonight are negotiating developments worth hundreds of millions of dollars." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I know." Vanessa smiled thinly. "No, I do not think you do." Cynthia Holloway crossed her arms and added with polished arrogance, "This is not the kind of place people simply wander into because they found a formal envelope." Several guests murmured agreement. One man near the staircase even raised his champagne glass slightly toward Vanessa in approval. Evelyn looked around the marble lobby again. Crystal chandeliers. Imported flowers flown in from Paris that morning. Gold-trimmed walls. Waiters carrying silver trays through crowds dressed in wealth so obvious it almost felt theatrical. Yet beneath all of it, she saw something else. Fear. Vanity. Status obsession. The desperate need to belong among powerful people. Her blue eyes settled quietly back on Vanessa. "You have spent so much energy protecting this room," Evelyn said softly, "that you stopped asking who built it." The sentence landed like a crack through glass. Vanessa's jaw tightened immediately. Cynthia frowned. Mr. Delaney looked visibly uncomfortable now. Even Ethan behind the desk looked down at the marble counter rather than meet anyone's eyes. Vanessa finally lost patience. "That is enough," she said firmly. "Mr. Delaney, escort Ms. Carter outside immediately." The room fell almost completely silent. A few guests looked relieved. Others looked eager. Public removal from a luxury gala was exactly the kind of scandal wealthy circles enjoyed pretending to dislike. Mr. Delaney approached Evelyn cautiously. "Ma'am," he said politely, "if you would come with me." Evelyn did not move. Instead, she slowly opened the black folder resting beneath her hand. Inside sat several cream-colored legal documents stamped with silver-embossed seals. One page shifted slightly beneath the chandelier light, revealing the words Aurelius Executive Transfer Agreement before Evelyn calmly closed the folder again. Mr. Delaney saw it clearly. So did Ethan. Their expressions changed instantly. Vanessa, however, remained too focused on winning the confrontation to notice. "This does not need to become embarrassing," Vanessa said coldly. "Please leave with dignity." Evelyn finally looked directly at her. The lobby held its breath. Then Evelyn spoke one calm sentence that somehow felt heavier than all the marble and crystal surrounding them. "Some doors do not recognize power until it is already too late." No one answered. For 2 full seconds, the only sound came from distant violin music drifting out of the ballroom. Then suddenly the dark glass elevators behind them illuminated again, this time brighter than before, bathing the entire lobby in soft gold light, while a quiet electronic voice echoed across the marble walls. Founder-level authorization detected. The electronic voice faded into silence, but the effect on the Grand Aurelius lobby was immediate and impossible to ignore. Every conversation stopped. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the violin music drifting from the ballroom seemed distant now beneath the weight of confusion spreading across the marble floor. The gold light surrounding the private elevators remained glowing softly, reflecting against polished walls and the stunned expressions of Manhattan's elite. Vanessa Whitmore stared toward the elevators for a moment before quickly forcing composure back onto her face. "There is obviously some technical malfunction," she announced sharply. Her voice echoed harder than she intended. Nobody answered immediately. Mr. Delaney, however, was no longer looking at the elevators. He was staring directly at the black folder beneath Evelyn Carter's hand. More specifically, at the silver embossed seal he had glimpsed seconds earlier before she closed it. He knew that seal. Only a handful of people in the entire hotel group had clearance to even view Aurelius' executive transfer agreements. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer. "Ms. Carter," he said quietly, "may I ask where you obtained those documents?" Vanessa turned toward him instantly. "Mr. Delaney, that is unnecessary." But the security supervisor barely heard her. His attention remained fixed on Evelyn. The lobby sensed the shift immediately. Confidence was beginning to crack beneath the polished surface of the evening. Evelyn met his gaze calmly. "They were delivered to me directly." "By whom?" Vanessa interrupted quickly. Evelyn's eyes moved briefly toward the glowing elevators again before returning to the marble desk. "People responsible for this building," she answered softly. Cynthia Holloway crossed her arms tighter. "This is absurd," she muttered. "Someone should call corporate already." Ethan, the younger employee behind the desk, suddenly looked pale. His fingers moved quickly across the hotel registry keyboard, as if searching for something he was afraid to find. Vanessa noticed immediately. "Ethan," she warned sharply. He hesitated, then quietly said, "Ms. Whitmore, there is something strange in the executive system." The room seemed to lean closer all at once. Vanessa's expression hardened. "What exactly does that mean?" Ethan swallowed nervously. "There is a restricted profile attached to the crest symbol on the invitation." Vanessa gave a cold laugh. "Then remove it from the system." Ethan looked up slowly. "I cannot." "Excuse me. The account is locked at founder clearance level." The words landed heavily across the chandelier-lit lobby. Several nearby guests exchanged uneasy glances. One older investor lowered his champagne glass completely. Vanessa's confidence flickered for the briefest second before she forced another polished smile. "Founder-level accounts are ceremonial archives," she replied quickly. "Old executive coding. It means nothing." But even she did not sound fully convinced anymore. Mr. Delaney looked at Evelyn again, this time with visible caution. "May I ask your full name, ma'am?" The room went silent. Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Evelyn Carter." Ethan's fingers froze above the keyboard. His eyes widened instantly. Vanessa noticed. "What now?" she snapped. Ethan looked terrified to speak. "The founder archive profile," he stopped. "Say it." Ethan glanced toward Evelyn, then back toward the glowing elevators. "The registered name attached to the clearance symbol is Carter." Complete silence fell across the lobby. Even Cynthia Holloway lost her expression for a moment. Vanessa, however, recovered quickly, almost aggressively. "Carter is not exactly a rare name," she said sharply. "That proves absolutely nothing." But beneath her controlled tone, uncertainty had finally arrived. Evelyn simply stood there quietly beneath the chandelier light, her old silver bracelet reflecting gold across the marble counter. She made no attempt to explain herself. No dramatic reveal. No arrogance. That restraint somehow made everything more unsettling. One of the wealthy guests, near the staircase, leaned toward another investor. "Wait," he whispered. "The original Aurelius founder disappeared from public business years ago, did she not? I thought she sold her shares." "No," another man quietly added. "I heard she kept majority voting rights hidden through private holdings." Vanessa heard the whispers spreading now. Dangerous whispers. Her jaw tightened harder. "Enough," she said firmly. "This woman has created confusion using outdated executive symbolism and unauthorized documents. That does not give her access to this event." But even as she spoke, her voice no longer carried complete authority. Mr. Delaney carefully reached toward the black folder again. "Ms. Carter," he said respectfully this time. Would you allow me to verify one document privately? Vanessa turned toward him in disbelief. You cannot seriously be entertaining this. He did not answer her immediately. Evelyn studied him quietly for a moment before slowly opening the folder herself. The nearest guest subtly leaned forward. Inside rested cream-colored legal documents marked with silver embossed seals, executive signatures, and confidential acquisition formatting. Near the bottom corner of the top page sat a signature line already completed in elegant dark blue ink. Ethan saw it first. His face lost color immediately, because the signature matched the name currently displayed inside the restricted founder account. Evelyn Carter. The room had gone completely still now. Vanessa noticed the reaction spreading around her and felt control slipping through her fingers for the first time all evening. What exactly are those documents? Cynthia asked nervously. Evelyn closed the folder gently before answering. Ownership transition agreements. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for champagne anymore. Then Evelyn lightly touched the old silver bracelet around her wrist and asked one calm question that sent another wave of tension through the marble lobby. Has the executive board arrived upstairs yet? And before anyone could answer, every chandelier in the Grand Aurelius Hotel dimmed softly for one brief second as the private glass elevators unlocked with a quiet metallic click. The metallic click of the private elevators echoed softly through the Grand Aurelius lobby, and for one suspended moment nobody moved at all. The glowing gold lights above the elevator doors remained steady now, no longer flickering like a malfunction. This time they looked deliberate, intentional. The wealthy guests gathered near the reception area began exchanging uneasy glances beneath the crystal chandeliers, while the distant string quartet inside the ballroom continued playing to a room that no longer held anyone's attention. Vanessa Whitmore could feel control slipping away from her carefully constructed evening, and nothing terrified her more than losing authority in public. She straightened her white satin gown and forced another polished smile onto her face. This has gone far enough, she announced firmly. I will not allow some strange executive archive confusion to disrupt a $7 million charity gala. Her voice carried sharply across the marble lobby. Several guests nodded immediately, grateful someone still sounded confident. Cynthia Holloway folded her arms tighter and added with cold agreement. Exactly. Every luxury venue in Manhattan deals with impersonators eventually. The word hung in the air. Impersonators. Evelyn Carter stood motionless beside the marble desk, her beige coat looking almost painfully simple against the gold reflections surrounding her. Yet somehow the calmer she became, the more nervous everyone else seemed. Mr. Delaney glanced again toward the elevators, then toward the black folder resting beneath Evelyn's hand. Ms. Whitmore, he said carefully. Perhaps we should contact executive operations before proceeding further. Vanessa turned toward him sharply. Executive operations, answer to me tonight. Technically, Ethan said quietly from behind the desk, the founder clearance system overrides gala authority. Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. Enough with the founder nonsense. She stepped directly toward Evelyn now, lowering her voice just enough to sound controlled while still ensuring every nearby guest could hear her clearly. You have caused confusion, interrupted guest check-in, and inserted yourself into restricted executive matters you clearly do not understand. Evelyn met her gaze calmly. Do I? That quiet response irritated Vanessa more than open defiance ever could. Around them, the lobby had become completely still. Champagne glasses rested untouched. Phones subtly emerged from designer purses beneath the excuse of checking messages. People sensed something important approaching. Vanessa decided she needed to crush the situation publicly before uncertainty spread any further. She reached toward the black folder on the marble desk. Let me make this very clear, she said coldly. No matter what outdated symbols or copied documents you carry, appearances still matter in this world. Then, in front of everyone watching, Vanessa slid the folder several inches across the marble counter away from Evelyn as though distancing the hotel from her entirely. The sharp sound of paper against polished stone echoed louder than expected through the silent lobby. Several guests visibly winced at the gesture. Cynthia, however, smirked approvingly. Finally, she muttered. Someone needed to say it. Vanessa continued, her confidence returning beneath the attention of the crowd. People who belong in rooms like this understand presentation, reputation, and standards. They do not arrive wearing old coats pretending to own buildings. The room went completely silent. Even Ethan looked uncomfortable now. Mr. Delaney's jaw tightened slightly. But Vanessa kept going. Quite honestly, she said, if you truly held any meaningful authority here, someone important would have recognized you by now. Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly toward the black folder resting on the marble counter. Then, very calmly, she reached inside and removed a single silver keycard unlike any card most guests had ever seen before. Matte silver. No room number. No branding. Only the same engraved crest resting on her bracelet. She placed it gently onto the marble desk between herself and Vanessa. The sound was soft, but every eye in the lobby immediately locked onto it. Ethan's face lost color instantly. Mr. Delaney stared openly now, because they both recognized what the card actually was. Founder-level master access. Vanessa, however, only saw another object she did not understand. What exactly is that supposed to prove? She asked coldly. Evelyn looked at her quietly for a moment before answering. Nothing. Then she lightly pushed the silver keycard toward Ethan. Please check the executive floor access logs. Ethan hesitated visibly. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. Do not touch that card. But Ethan was already staring at the crest engraved into the silver surface. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The moment the card touched the scanner beside the desk, the entire reception system froze. Every monitor behind the marble counter went black simultaneously. A collective murmur spread through the lobby. Then one by one, the screens illuminated gold. Not blue, not white, gold. Across every monitor appeared the same words in elegant lettering. Founder authorization verified. Beneath it sat a single name. Evelyn Carter. The room stopped breathing. Cynthia's champagne glass slipped slightly in her hand. Mr. Delaney took an unconscious step backward. Ethan looked like he might faint entirely. Vanessa Whitmore, however, stared at the screen in complete disbelief. That is impossible, she whispered. But before anyone could speak again, one final line appeared beneath Evelyn's name across every monitor in the Grand Aurelius lobby. Executive Board awaiting arrival on VIP floor. The golden glow from the reception monitors reflected across stunned faces throughout the Grand Aurelius lobby, while absolute silence settled over the marble floor. Nobody reached for their champagne anymore. Nobody whispered. Even the distant ballroom music suddenly felt unreal compared to the words still glowing across every screen. Founder authorization verified. Evelyn Carter. Vanessa Whitmore stared at the monitors as though the building itself had betrayed her. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Beside her, Cynthia Holloway slowly lowered her champagne glass with trembling fingers, her polished confidence evaporating beneath the gold light washing across the lobby. Ethan stepped back from the scanner completely, his breathing shallow now. It is really her, he whispered almost to himself. Mr. Delaney straightened immediately, his entire posture changing from guarded authority to visible respect. Because now he understood why the bracelet had looked familiar, why the elevators had responded, why the executive system had locked itself. Years earlier during elite management training, employees had been shown a single archived image connected to the hidden founder protocols of the Aurelius properties. A silver crest, a founder access bracelet, a name almost nobody in the public business world had seen in years. Evelyn Carter. The woman who quietly built the Aurelius luxury empire before disappearing from public leadership nearly a decade earlier. The same woman, now standing calmly in a beige coat beside the marble reception desk, while Manhattan's wealthiest guests struggled to process what they had done. Vanessa finally found her voice. No, she said weakly. That cannot be possible. Evelyn looked at her quietly. Why? Vanessa blinked rapidly. Because the founder stepped away years ago. The company board said what was necessary for privacy. Evelyn answered softly. The room remained frozen. Several investors near the staircase had already begun pulling out their phones, searching headlines and archived financial articles. One older man suddenly looked pale. My God, he whispered. She never sold controlling ownership. Another investor stared openly at Evelyn now. She kept the majority shares through private trusts. Which means, Cynthia began quietly before stopping herself. Mr. Delaney answered for her. She still owns the company. The words landed across the lobby with almost physical weight. Vanessa looked like the floor beneath her designer heels had vanished entirely. Evelyn reached calmly for the black folder still resting on the marble counter and opened it fully for the first time all evening. Inside sat the cream-colored legal agreements everyone had glimpsed only partially before. Acquisition transfers, executive restructuring documents, board replacement authorizations. And at the bottom of the top page, beneath the silver embossed Aurelius seal, sat Evelyn Carter's signature in dark blue ink. Clean, elegant, final. Tonight was supposed to be private, Evelyn said quietly. The executive board is upstairs waiting for approval on the transition. Ethan stared at the documents. Transition? Evelyn nodded once. I am reclaiming direct operational control of the Aurelius properties beginning tonight. The room went silent again. Vanessa's face lost all remaining color, because suddenly every decision she had made that evening became horrifyingly clear. She had publicly insulted the owner of the building, questioned her legitimacy, ordered security to remove her, mocked her appearance in front of investors standing only feet away. Cynthia took one small step backward as realization spread through the lobby like cold water. The people who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact entirely. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked frightened. The atmosphere had transformed completely. The same guests who dismissed Evelyn's beige coat minutes earlier now stared at her with careful respect. But Evelyn herself had not changed at all. Same calm expression, same quiet posture, same old silver bracelet reflecting chandelier light across the marble counter. Vanessa swallowed hard. Ms. Carter, she began shakily. If there has been some misunderstanding tonight, I assure you. There was no misunderstanding, Evelyn interrupted gently. Her voice never rose. You understood exactly what you saw. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Because deep down everyone in the lobby knew she was right. Vanessa had seen a quiet woman in ordinary clothes and decided immediately she did not belong. That judgment had shaped every word afterward. Evelyn closed the folder softly. I came tonight without an entourage, without press, and without executive introduction for one reason, she continued calmly. I wanted to see whether this hotel still understood the meaning of hospitality. Mr. Delaney lowered his eyes slightly. Ethan looked ashamed. Cynthia could not even look at Evelyn anymore. Vanessa, however, looked completely shattered now beneath the golden chandelier light. The private glass elevators behind them suddenly chimed. Softly. Then the doors opened. Several members of the Aurelius executive board stepped into the lobby in tailored suits and formal evening gowns. The moment they saw Evelyn Carter standing beside the reception desk, every one of them stopped immediately. Then, in front of the entire silent lobby, the chairman of the executive board stepped forward and bowed his head respectfully. Ms. Carter, he said carefully, the board has been waiting for you upstairs. The room went completely still. Vanessa Whitmore looked like she could barely remain standing. And beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Aurelius Hotel, the woman they dismissed for looking poor quietly became the most powerful person in the building. The executive board members remained standing beside the open glass elevators while the entire Grand Aurelius lobby struggled to recover from what had just happened. Gold light shimmered across crystal chandeliers and marble floors, but the atmosphere no longer felt glamorous. It felt exposed. Every whispered comment from earlier now hung in the air like evidence no one could erase. Vanessa Whitmore stood frozen beside the reception desk, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Only minutes earlier she had spoken with complete certainty, convinced that a worn beige coat revealed everything worth knowing about a person. Now the woman she had publicly humiliated stood revealed as the founder and controlling owner of the entire Aurelius empire. Around the lobby, wealthy guests avoided looking at one another. Some quietly lowered their eyes. Others pretended to study auction brochures they were no longer reading. The same people who had laughed about Evelyn Carter's shoes and coat now looked deeply uncomfortable remembering their own words. Cynthia Holloway finally found her voice first. Ms. Carter, she said quietly, stepping forward with visible embarrassment, I believe we may have misjudged the situation. Evelyn looked at her calmly. You judged exactly what you wanted to see. Cynthia lowered her eyes immediately. Nearby, the older investor who had joked about valet parking cleared his throat awkwardly before setting down his champagne glass. Altogether, Nobody seemed interested in luxury anymore. The illusion of sophistication had cracked too deeply. Vanessa finally forced herself to speak. "Ms. Carter," she began carefully, "I owe you an apology." Her voice sounded smaller now. Fragile. "My responsibility tonight was to protect the reputation of this event." Evelyn studied her quietly for a long moment before answering. "Reputation is not protected by excluding people who look different from your expectations." The sentence landed softly, but nobody in the lobby could escape it. Mr. Delaney straightened beside the marble desk, visibly ashamed. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I should have handled this differently." Ethan looked equally embarrassed behind the glowing reception monitors. "I knew something was wrong earlier," he admitted quietly. "I just did not speak up." Evelyn gave him a small, understanding nod. Fear of authority makes good people stay silent sometimes. Ethan swallowed hard at that. Vanessa, however, looked devastated now as realization fully settled in. She glanced around the lobby and suddenly saw the scene through completely different eyes. The whispered comments, the cold stares, the assumptions made within seconds. She had spent years building luxury experiences while forgetting the most basic principle of hospitality itself: human dignity. One of the executive board members stepped forward then, an older man named Charles Beaumont, whose family had partnered with Aurelius Developments for decades. He looked directly at Vanessa. "Ms. Whitmore," he said firmly but professionally, "founder evaluations are conducted specifically to assess how management treats individuals without visible status indicators." Vanessa's expression collapsed further. "Evaluations?" Charles nodded once. "Ms. Carter has quietly visited 6 Aurelius properties over the past year without executive introduction." A murmur spread through the lobby. Evelyn remained calm. Charles continued. "Most locations passed because staff treated every guest respectfully regardless of appearance." He paused briefly. Tonight, unfortunately, became a different example. Vanessa looked physically ill now beneath the chandelier light. Cynthia stepped backward slowly, suddenly desperate to distance herself from the situation entirely. Several guests who had laughed earlier quietly disappeared toward the ballroom entrance, unwilling to remain under the weight of their own behavior. Evelyn looked around the marble lobby once more. The gold walls, the expensive gowns, the polished shoes, the towering arrangements of imported white orchids. Earlier the room had felt full of superiority. Now it felt humbled. She turned calmly toward Vanessa again. "You know what the saddest part is?" she asked softly. Vanessa could barely meet her eyes. "No." Evelyn glanced briefly toward the front entrance where ordinary hotel guests occasionally passed through the lower lobby beneath the luxury levels above. Most people who walk into places like this are already carrying invisible burdens. Long workdays, family problems, financial pressure, loneliness. Her voice remained gentle. The last thing they need is to be treated as lesser human beings because of a coat or a pair of shoes. Complete silence followed her words. Even the executive board members lowered their eyes slightly, because everyone in that room knew she was right. Evelyn rested one hand lightly against the black folder holding the ownership documents. "Luxury should never mean cruelty disguised as standards," she said quietly. Vanessa's eyes filled with visible regret now. "I understand that now." Evelyn nodded softly. "Good." There was no anger in her voice. No need for revenge. That somehow made the moment even more powerful. She could have humiliated Vanessa publicly the way she herself had been humiliated earlier. She could have fired employees on the spot or made dramatic demands in front of the investors and socialites surrounding them. Instead, she remained composed. Fair. Human. Charles Beaumont glanced toward the executive elevators still standing open behind them. "The board is prepared upstairs whenever you are ready, Miss Carter." Evelyn gave a small nod before turning toward the elevators. But just before stepping away, she paused beside the reception desk one final time. Her blue eyes moved calmly across the silent lobby filled with wealthy guests who no longer looked nearly as important as they had an hour earlier. "The easiest way to reveal character," she said softly, "is to watch how someone treats a person they think cannot benefit them." No one answered. Because beneath the crystal lights of the Grand Aurelius Hotel, every person in that lobby had just learned exactly what their own character looked like. The private glass elevators closed softly behind Evelyn Carter as she stepped onto the executive floor of the Grand Aurelius Hotel, leaving the marble lobby below wrapped in stunned silence. For several long seconds after the doors disappeared behind gold-tinted glass, nobody downstairs moved at all. The crystal chandeliers still glowed. Champagne still sparkled untouched in crystal flutes. The orchestra inside the ballroom continued playing elegant music for guests who no longer cared about the gala itself. Something much more important had happened that night. The illusion that wealth automatically created class had shattered in front of everyone. Upstairs, the executive board meeting lasted less than 40 minutes. That fact alone sent waves of tension through the hotel management staff waiting nervously below. Because meetings involving billion-dollar restructuring agreements were never supposed to move quickly unless decisions had already been made long before anyone entered the room. Vanessa Whitmore remained near the reception desk the entire time, standing almost motionless beside the marble counter where she had publicly dismissed the owner of the building over a beige coat and a quiet voice. Cynthia Holloway had quietly left the gala altogether 20 minutes earlier, unable to tolerate the embarrassment hanging over the evening. Many guests followed soon after, speaking in low, careful voices now instead of arrogant whispers. Nobody laughed anymore. Ethan continued staring occasionally toward the elevators, replaying every moment of the night in his mind. He remembered how Evelyn Carter had thanked him politely even while others mocked her. How she never once raised her voice, never demanded respect, never threatened anyone with power despite holding more authority than everyone in the building combined. That realization stayed with him harder than the shock itself. True power had stood quietly in front of them all night without needing to announce itself once. Nearly an hour later, the gold elevator lights illuminated again. The entire lobby instinctively turned toward them at once. The glass doors opened slowly. Evelyn stepped out first, still wearing the same worn beige coat and old silver bracelet. Nothing about her appearance had changed, but everything about the room had. Behind her walked the full executive board of Heiress International, including Charles Beaumont and several senior directors who normally appeared only in financial magazines and private investor summits. This time, however, they followed half a step behind Evelyn with visible respect. The lobby fell silent again as she approached the reception desk one final time. Vanessa immediately straightened herself, though her confidence never returned. "Ms. Carter," she said quietly, "I know an apology cannot undo tonight." Evelyn looked at her calmly. "No," she answered softly, "but understanding can prevent the next one." Vanessa lowered her eyes. For the first time all evening, there was no arrogance left in her voice at all. "I spent so many years trying to protect luxury that I forgot dignity matters more than appearance." Evelyn nodded once. Most people do not notice when kindness disappears slowly. The sentence settled gently across the marble lobby. Ethan looked down at the desk, ashamed of his own silence earlier. Evelyn noticed immediately. She turned toward him instead. "What is your full name?" Ethan looked startled. "Ethan Brooks, ma'am." "How long have you worked here, Ethan?" "Almost 3 years." Evelyn glanced briefly toward Charles Beaumont beside her. He was the only person tonight who looked uncertain instead of amused. Ethan blinked in surprise. Charles immediately understood. "We are currently restructuring guest relations leadership across several Heiress properties," he said carefully. "Perhaps Mr. Brooks should be considered for management training." Ethan looked completely stunned. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Realizing the quiet young employee she had silenced earlier was now being offered an opportunity because he still carried basic human decency when others abandoned it. Evelyn reached into the black folder one final time and removed a single signed document. Then, calmly and without drama, she placed it onto the marble reception desk where Vanessa had pushed her folder away earlier that evening. The silver embossed title reflected beneath the chandelier light. Executive Hospitality Reform Authorization. Vanessa stared at it silently. Every Heiress property will begin mandatory hospitality retraining next month, Evelyn said softly. Not about luxury standards. About human standards. Nobody in the lobby spoke. Because deep down, everyone knew the lesson had already begun tonight. Evelyn gently picked up the silver founder access keycard resting beside the monitor scanner. For a moment, she looked around the grand Heiress lobby one last time. The marble floors, the towering orchids, the gold chandeliers, the expensive suits and gowns. Earlier those things had seemed powerful. Now they felt strangely small compared to the quiet dignity of the woman standing among them. She slipped the silver keycard into her coat pocket and turned toward the front entrance. As the doors opened, cool Manhattan night air drifted softly into the lobby. A Blacktown car waited outside beneath the city lights, but Evelyn paused before stepping out. Then she looked back once more at the silent room filled with people who would never forget this night. "The easiest mistake in the world," she said quietly, "is believing someone has no value because they do not dress like wealth." Nobody answered. They did not need to. Because beneath the fading gold light of the Grand Aurelius Hotel, every person standing there finally understood something far more valuable than luxury. Respect was never supposed to be reserved for the rich. And as Evelyn Carter walked calmly into the Manhattan night, carrying nothing but a simple black folder and an old silver bracelet, the room remained completely silent behind her.